Welcome to the Jerusalem Dispatch podcast, produced here at the studio of the Jerusalem Post. And with me, as always, my co-host, Ruth Eglash, the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Report.
And this is Calev Ben David, the host of the ILTV Security Brief.
And Ruth, for months we've been talking about a possible agreement between the U.S. and Iran, and we have, I guess, a semi-agreement, an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, and the start of the negotiations. And the question is, especially for us here in Israel, is where does this leave us now? Where does this deal or this semi-deal leave us?
I mean, I think it was so built up over the last few weeks that we were heading towards this point. And when President Trump announced the MOU and the points of this memorandum became clear, I think there was an overwhelming feeling in Israel of disappointment with this MOU, that we'd gone through this war, that we put up with ballistic missiles, we sat in our shelters, as we did many times even during this podcast, and what did we achieve for Israel?
Right, and that's look, we have to be fair. There's a 60-day ceasefire period in which there are negotiations, which they just finished the first round in Switzerland. So we can't concretely, but I have to say, the signs, certainly the optics are not good for Israel. And who's leading the negotiations for the United States is Vice President J.D. Vance, who Israel is perceived certainly as being the less sympathetic to its concerns among major figures in the administration. We don't see, for example, Secretary of State Rubio taking an active role in the negotiations. The negotiations are being mediated by Qatar and Pakistan,
Yes.
two countries that have been outright hostile to Israel.
Yeah.
I was disturbed just to see even the warm hugs that Vice President.
That did cross my mind yesterday when I saw them, shaking hands, and I thought, wow, this
Hugging, not just shaking hands.
America and Iran. I mean, when we were in the midst of the JCPOA in 2015, at least there was, Britain, France, the P5+1,
Right.
who are allies, the Western powers who are allies of Israel.
Well, even if you don't say they're allies, they're not enemies.
Right.
Out there,
Right.
In the way that Qatar and Pakistan.
But they spent I think it was a year and a half negotiating the Iran deal, which everyone said was a bad thing, and now they have 60 days to negotiate it, and it doesn't. I mean, definitely, there's not a feeling of security. We don't feel confident.
I should know. The people realize the hotel that I think it's Bergenstock, Switzerland, was taking place. The Palace Hotel is owned by Qatar, by this sovereign fund of Qatar. This comes, and I don't know if you watched it, after President Trump held a ceremony to welcome the arrival of the new Air Force One jet,
Right.
Which was paid for by the government of Qatar for I think it's $400 million. I mean, the optics are worrying for Israel, even if we don't have so much substance yet. But there is a little bit of substance. What came out? I mean, I think the headline that came out of this meeting is this formation. I think they're calling it a deconfliction cell, which is just a sort of a mediation body primarily between the United States government and the Lebanese government, but with the other mediators involved, the ones we've just talked about, to basically deal with the Lebanon issue and the ongoing conflict. And one thing that Israel has said for weeks, if not months now, is that we have to sort of disconnect the U.S. Negotiations with Iran, the desire to end the war with Iran, with Israel's conflict with Hezbollah, which is ongoing. And the first thing that comes out of the first negotiating session is this sort of body that is supposed to negotiate, deal with the ongoing issues in Lebanon between Israel and Hezbollah, and Israel is actually not a part of it.
I mean, it's such in stark contrast to what we saw at the beginning of this war in February 28th, where we saw U.S. fighter jets and Israeli fighter jets, side by side. We saw the President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu word for word almost in what they said at the start of this war. And now Israel's not even involved in, as you said, even in the Lebanon part of this, which directly impacts Israeli civilians living in the borderline communities, and that's really jarring. I mean, I think that is what stands out most to me, is that this difference, this gap, is growing between the U.S. and Israel. Whereas at the beginning, I mean, like 4 months ago, it was like there was no daylight between the two, and it was very clear that both countries were trying to achieve the same thing, have the same goals, and now the goals are completely different.
Right. Well, I want to be fair I'm all bending over backwards, right, to be fair to the Trump administration, President Trump, who has been a supporter of Israel and a president who's done unprecedented things in support of Israel. So we don't know yet where he's going to go on Iran. And again, he made threats against Iran on his Truth Social account about the bombing will restart if they don't agree. But on the Lebanon issue, it's clearly those differences are not implied; they've emerged. I do hear from security experts that the IDF has been told to basically stand down from its offensive actions in Lebanon. It's basically now in a kind of a holding pattern. It could react to attacks from Hezbollah, but it can't initiate the kind of operation, not just in Beirut, but even against whatever Hezbollah forces there might still be, that it's detecting either even parts of the security zone where the IDF is still standing. And the rhetoric of President Trump just the last couple of days about Israel and Lebanon, saying Israel shouldn't overreact. Prime Minister Netanyahu specifically is overreacting. Why does he have to bring down a whole building? This is at the same time
for one Hezbollah guy.
This is at the same time when he's threatening to basically level Iran.
I mean, but I think the question is, Calev, that what has this fighting achieved?
Right.
I mean, there have, the leadership of Hezbollah were destroyed. We had that amazing Beeper, operation, which was, impressive, the stuff of movies, right? It really was beyond the wildest imagination. But has it really achieved what it set out to achieve? And you can keep on blowing up buildings and you can keep on destroying the top level of leadership, but does it create change? And we're talking about areas of southern Lebanon that Hezbollah is part of the fabric of the society there. It's not just a fighting machine. It's governance. It's in social welfare. It's running the education system. I mean, it's also an ideology, the same as what you have with Hamas. It's a thought. It's an ideology in the minds and the hearts of the people. So how do you fight that? You can blow up hundreds of buildings, but you're not going to change what's inside of the people. You might even make that feeling stronger inside the people. So, I feel like there is a lack of strategy in that regard. And the same with the whole Iran war, there's just there wasn't this thought process in Israel that at some point Trump, as Trump does, would back out of this war and try and bring it to an end, even though Israel was in it for the long haul and ready to make that sacrifice.
I think that's the key, what you just said. Israel in it for long haul. I've been the past couple of days at this conference in Jerusalem, JNS.
Mm-hmm.
Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke last night, spoke about these issues. He tried to paint the most optimistic picture. He was able to, and he did point specifically to some of the things you just mentioned, the Beeper operation and Israel's establishing the security zone in South Lebanon, of course, decimating the Iranian leadership and its military might. But again, there's the problem of expectations that were raised by the initial strike against Iran and the taking out of the supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei. But it did not lead to the overthrow of the regime or to forcing Iran, at least to this point, to make the kind of concessions that Israel wanted to make. And as you said, Israel's for the long haul. Clearly, there had to be perhaps some plan B in place if, in fact, the situation would be more of a long-term situation, which that President Trump is not the kind of leader, even though he can be quite daring in taking actions, does not want to ask the American people to make sacrifices in their lifestyle. Not going to ask them to ration gasoline the way Franklin Roosevelt did during World War II to the American people. If it wasn't going to be if the regime was not going to be overthrown, then what? Then what is your strategy? And it seems like there was a, at least on the Israeli side, a sort of a lacking a kind of plan B.
A lack of foresight. I mean, Israelis are used to paying high prices for gas. They see that as part of the sacrifice of living here, maybe, that the Israelis have to deal with the hostile, entities all around them, and they sacrifice their sons and daughters for the army.
Why it's not even a theory, because if you're looking at Lebanon, we're talking just for five
soldiers were killed in the last few days.
Just the last few days, which is a huge sacrifice in Lebanon. And there are voices questioning that, the strategy of Lebanon, but in generally still to the point of the feeling that they're protecting the northern communities by being in Lebanon. And there are uncovering things like this massive tunnel complex they just discovered, really not that far from the northern border that Hezbollah was maintaining. Yeah. So there's an understanding even that Israel's prepared ready to sacrifice its sons and daughters. And the case in the U.S. was not made for sacrificing American lives to deal with the Iranian threat. That case wasn't made sufficiently enough clearly, and that's gained those voices.
I mean, I think Israelis have been in this. Obviously they've been in this phase of war since October 7th, 2023. But it's a long running mindset that Israelis make sacrifices. The country is very small. People are very interconnected. They always say everyone knew someone from October 7th who was murdered or who was a survivor. And it's the same with the northern communities. I mean, even every night on television, on Channel 12, which has the highest ratings, they have this, these little segments of children. I was watching it last night, of children in the northern communities who missed out on their bar mitzvahs, and they missed out on school, like end of school. And
I don't think there's enough recognition of what the North is going through. Ruth, I think you were
I was just there this weekend, and it really is not the North that we all know and love. It's part of Israel where Israelis and foreign tourists love going and visiting and staying in all the little hotels and bed and breakfast places that they have all over the north, and the nature is gorgeous, and there's all these small little cottage industries. And the further north you go, as you drive along the roads in Israel, the traffic becomes less and less and less and less, and you can really feel the difference as you get towards Kiryat Shmona, which is not a tiny village. It's actually quite a big town. And you see the difference from what it used to be to how it is today. And, why the rest of the country is carrying on. The Iran war is hopefully behind us. And but in the northern communities, and you can hear explosions. I mean, I was there for Friday and Saturday, and I heard, explosions across the border, even as they were talking about the ceasefire going into effect. You could hear the rumbling in the distance.
Right, and I think, again, though, it's because of that, and because that story is being told, for example, as you said, even in the media here, even for those who don't live there, we're not going up there and seeing it firsthand, as you are, that Israelis, for the time being, are prepared to make the sacrifice of seeing these casualties mount up in the Lebanon security zone, a feeling that for the time being, there needs to be an offensive against Hezbollah, so we don't return to a point where they're right on the border so that it can carry out on October 7th. But there needs to be a vision as to where we're going. Like you said before, it simply is maintaining the security zone, but it's hard to imagine continuing when these drone attacks, which are taking quite a heavy toll on the soldiers. Is it to reach an agreement with the Lebanese government? And Israel is this week meeting again with representatives. And how much control is the U.S. going to have over that process? This is something that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been loath to address, in a sense also because he doesn't want to take... He's spoken about it obliquely, saying Israel will maintain its security, will stay in the security in Lebanon, but there are specific things happening in the ground. And he said at some point, you have to wonder when Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to have to be willing to more directly contradict President Trump in the way that he was willing to do, for example, with Presidents Obama and Biden when he felt that they were crossing a line in involving themselves in Israel's and compromising Israel's security.
I mean, I think that definitely, I mean, we're heading to kind of like a showdown point because we are about to see elections called in Israel, maybe even this week. I mean, Netanyahu has basically until October in office, and then there's definitely going to be election by the end of October. So, he's going to have to take care of his base, which a large number of the communities in northern Israel form part of his base. They are traditionally Likud voters, and they are feeling very frustrated. And then on the other hand, I keep hearing, even from some of his, staunch supporters or staunch Likud voters, a huge amount of disappointment with the way things are between him and Trump, and the fact that Trump is going in this direction.
In fact, it was reported in local media here that the Likud had planned a whole campaign, election campaign, highlighting the partnership between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, something we've seen in previous elections.
Yes.
We've seen these gigantic posters on the sides of buildings in Jerusalem going the entire length of the building.
Yes.
Of Trump and Netanyahu together and talking about...
What was it? Liga Tacheret? A different league.
They're in a different league. These two leaders are in a different league. And so reportedly, the Likud basically had to dump that strategy.
Yeah, no, I think there's a great amount of disappointment. I also think that, Netanyahu was, I think I don't have any factual basis for this, but I think Netanyahu was really hoping for some sort of big win before the elections, that he could go to his base and go to also to bring in more voters and say, listen, we suffered through October 7th, but since then we did this. And there are some wins here and there, but he was looking for that big win. And Iran...
a big one would have to be Hezbollah, or let's say even Iran is off the table now. Hezbollah and Hamas.
Or a peace deal with Saudi Arabia, or even something with Lebanon. But I just can't see any of that happening in, the way things are going now. Hezbollah is not giving up, and, they're almost enjoying the fact that there's this dissonance between Trump and Netanyahu.
No,
it's almost like they keep doing it because of that.
Well, this beyond just enjoying it, I think they are provoking it.
Yeah.
I think Iran and Hezbollah are working.
I mean, I think that's one of the things. One of their goals is to see is to, get in between the special Israel-U.S. relationship and try and weaken it, which they seem to be doing.
Right, by exploiting that that desire by President Trump to certainly not see this conflict bleed into over the summer, running up to, we talked about elections, the November congressional elections in the United States, which is a lot of concern among Republicans of the Democrats gaining control of the House of Representatives, even some saying the Senate is in play, which could be a real hardship for President Trump. And I think that that's exactly the reason Iran is insisting to try to link the conflict in Lebanon with its peace negotiations with the U.S. to kind of use that to create this wedge between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And it's going to be Prime Minister Netanyahu is between a rock and a hard place.
And it will be very interesting to see how this plays out on internal Israeli politics, which are about to come to the forefront of our news cycles very, very soon.
Right. In previous elections, and maybe this is the last thing that I could say about it, Prime Minister Netanyahu has run as by presenting himself as the one Israeli politician who's willing to stand up to U.S. leaders in particular. First of all, to President Obama and then President Biden, and say he's the only thing between Palestinians, the U.S. imposing a Palestinian settlement or a Palestinian state on Israel. And it would be ironic or for him to have to present himself as doing that to President Trump. But again, the speaker at this conference has some of the speakers not in politics have been saying that the U.S. at some point is going to have to make it clear to the U.S. that this is the red lines, that it can't go beyond it.
Yeah, definitely. And
I want to. Speaking of dissonance between what is happening there, just to shift a little to the sporting world. There is the World Cup going on now, And again, one of the ironies to see, as we talked about the U.S. and Iran negotiating now after being in a virtual state of war, the Iranian national team is playing in the World Cup in the United States at this time. I was very struck by the coach of the Iranian team claiming that Iran is the most oppressed team in the entire World Cup because if you haven't been following it, they're making the Iranian national squad. The cup is being played across Mexico, the United States, and Canada, and they're making the Iranian national team stay in Mexico, right over the border in Tijuana, the U.S.-Mexico border, because they say for security reasons, it's better for them being in the United States, so they have to commute to their games. Their first game in Los Angeles. Apparently, that was a huge hardship for the Iranian team. They also, by the way, the U.S. Barred the entry of about a little more than a dozen Iranian members, not of the team, not players, but support staff, saying that these were officials that had some links to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in this sort of somehow managed, so they were barred from going to the U.S. So the Iranian coach going on and saying we're the most oppressed team. I thought was point out that if you're looking for Iranian footballers that are being oppressed, there's Mohammad Rashid Mazahiri, who was arrested because he was a goaltender on the national team, who was arrested because earlier this year because he made some posts critical of the Ayatollah Khamenei, the then supreme leader. At least two other footballers, Mohammed Husseini was detained earlier this year also because they said of charges, dissent against the regime and also against Allah, which carries the death penalty. He's still in custody. There's another Iranian footballer, Voria Ghafouri, who was a former member of the national team, who was detained earlier a few years ago, and now he's being threatened again. And this is the team that is playing in the World Cup. This is the oppressed squad making this commute to Los Angeles and not being.
It's amazing how politics plays into sporting events. Well, I think we discussed the Eurovision back when it was on. It's unbelievable how this permeates things where it shouldn't. I mean, also with the tensions between Israel and the Palestinians plays out in FIFA as well, which I've covered a few times in the past with Jabril Rajoub, who's the head of the Palestinian Football Association, trying to get Israel banned for all various reasons, maybe playing in the West Bank settlements and also blocking Palestinian players from reaching their, teams and etc. So,
but there is footage of this game that was played with the Iranian national team in Los Angeles, I think, against the Belgian team, in which some Palestinian flags were displayed.
I heard about
in the state, and one of the fans had brought along an Israeli flag in case this would happen. And tried to display an Israeli flag. And in America, the ushers made the young man with the Israeli flag put away the Israeli flag, but the Palestinian flag was allowed to be displayed in it, even though, of course, because the Israeli flag was a political symbol, but not the Palestinian flag.
I mean, if we're talking about sports, which is really not my area of expertise, and I've only ever done a few sports stories in my life, even though I've written many, many stories. Let's talk about the Maccabiah.
Absolutely, because the new issue, we should say, the new issue of the Jerusalem Report is out now, highlighting what's called the Jewish Olympics. You'll see plenty of Israeli flags at this event, which is the Maccabiah. Let's talk a little about that. It's somewhat special this year.
I mean, I think it's for me. I mean, I'm someone who doesn't like to write about sports, but I do love watching sports, and I love participating and myself. And I think what has been interesting for me to see is that they were ready to do the Maccabiah exactly 1 year ago.
Right.
And because of the war with Iran, they had to postpone it, which is very difficult for people who are ready to go and
I would say this brings Jewish athletes from all over all over the world to come.
Right, there's teams from all over the world. Jewish communities send athletes from all over the world. and they prepare for all different sports. I mean, they have sports in the Maccabiah that they don't have in the Olympics, but they have all different sports, and the athletes weren't able to come a year ago, and now they're going to do it. It starts on the evening of the 1st of July is the big opening ceremony, which is like another week and a half.
Right.
And but a lot of countries are not going to be participating because of the problems with flights, with insurance, with the insecurity of knowing whether they can make it here or not. So it's going to be a much smaller event than it was in previous years, even though it's still going to be probably the biggest event that Israel had.
By the way, when it is held at full strength, first, it's often called the biggest sporting event in the world outside of the Olympics, and gathering the amount of people that gathers in one place. And we should know some young Jewish athletes early in their careers, and I do follow sports quite a bit. Took place in the Maccabiah, won medals there, and went on to much greater glory in the world athletic stage. The most notable example, Mark Spitz, of course, the great Olympic,
the best example of the best athlete.
Yeah, American
swimmer,
Jewish swimmer who, for a long time, held the record for the most Olympic medals, and he actually, as a young man, swam and was a winner in the Maccabiah games. Many others I could cite. So it is a special, and as you said, it's going to be the biggest event we've had, the biggest international event we've had here since, I guess, since October 7th. Bruce.
Yeah. It's going to be the biggest gathering of people since October 7th. That's what they say.
True. As we say here, it is.
Hopefully, I mean, everything is always uncertain here at the moment, so hopefully it will go ahead in another week and a half. And but like I said, a lot of countries had to pull their teams out because they just couldn't make it here, like physically, and also be covered by insurance.
All right. Well, let's was a successful Maccabiah. By the way, speaking of sports, I just want to close, since some of you may hear my voice and know that I'm a native New Yorker. The New York Knicks won their championship.
I heard something about it.
3 years, and
I heard a little something about it.
For someone wondering why I'm bringing this up on this podcast, there was a Jewish connection. By the way, a big chant in New York after they had won the third game was people were got to be a very famous chant in New York. But our mayors are Muslim, our bagels are Jewish, our Christian Dior, the Knicks in 4. I'm not going to explain that thing, that they're going to win 4 games. And there's been a lot of talk. Of course, Mayor Mamdani, who I've spoken about on this thing, and who just recently called supporters of AIPAC monsters. I'm not going to rehash that whole thing again. And that, but certainly, as a Knicks fan, and there's a lot of Jewish connections. For those who know that history, I actually grew up in the same neighborhood as the former Jewish coach of the Knicks, who led them to their previous championships. A gentleman named Red Holtzman lived in my neighborhood on Long Island. Certainly, I'm happy to say, for this Jewish fan, even though, given who Mayor Mamdani is the one benefiting it from it. But what I can unreservedly say, and maybe this is a good note to say, we should give our support to our Maccabiah athletes.
Yes.
And with all of the concerns that we spoke about just now, rightly concerned, it's events like this that maybe show a kind of resilience, not just of Israel, but I think of the Jewish people and its connection with Israel.
Yeah, and I really, really hope that it goes ahead this year. Yeah, I hope nothing happens between now.
I hope that the next time we meet, we could be talking about the event will be, I guess, ongoing.
Yes.
And we could look at that.
See if there's any upcoming athletes.
See if who's going to be the next Mark Spitz. And on that note, Ruth, maybe thank the viewers for joining us here once again on the Jerusalem Dispatch.
Thank you.